Tensions between India and Pakistan have simmered for decades, with both nations sharing a long history of conflict. While diplomatic efforts have been made to ease tensions, the possibility of a full-scale war between these two nuclear-armed neighbors remains a deeply concerning scenario. In this video, we will explore a hypothetical situation where India and Pakistan enter into a conventional war, but foreign powers come into play, changing the dynamics of the conflict. Bangladesh, allied with Pakistan through a nuclear and military treaty, and China's influence will also shape the course of events. We'll analyze what could happen first in a conventional war and what the potential consequences would be if the conflict escalates into a nuclear confrontation. Let's start by imagining a conventional war between India and Pakistan. Historically, the two countries have clashed on multiple occasions, primarily over the disputed region of Kashmir. In this hypothetical scenario, tensions flare up once again, and after a series of border skirmishes, both sides mobilize their military forces for a full-scale confrontation. India, with its larger military and economic power, would likely focus on using its conventional forces to overwhelm Pakistan. India's armed forces consist of over 1.4 million active personnel and a vast arsenal of modern equipment, including tanks, fighter jets, and naval assets. In response, Pakistan would rely heavily on its strategic location and defensive capabilities, using its smaller but highly trained military to conduct rapid strikes, defend key positions, and utilize its terrain for guerrilla-style warfare. In the early stages of a conventional conflict, India might aim to capture critical territory in Pakistan-controlled Kashmir, launching airstrikes and ground operations to seize strategic positions. Pakistan, aware of India's military superiority, would likely engage in counteroffensive operations, launching cross-border attacks and attempting to disrupt India's supply lines. Pakistan's air force, though smaller than India's, would play a critical role in providing air cover and conducting strategic bombings. At this point, foreign powers come into play. Bangladesh, which has traditionally maintained neutral relations with both India and Pakistan, enters the conflict by forming an alliance with Pakistan. In this hypothetical scenario, Bangladesh and Pakistan have signed a military and nuclear treaty, allowing them to share military resources and coordinate their defense efforts. Bangladesh's entry into the conflict significantly alters the regional dynamics. While Bangladesh's military is smaller than India's, its involvement could stretch India's resources by opening a second front along the India-Bangladesh border. Bangladesh's army could conduct cross-border raids and disrupt Indian military operations in the northeast, forcing India to divert troops and equipment to counter the new threat. Additionally, Bangladesh's geographical position would provide Pakistan with strategic depth, allowing it to launch operations from a more secure position and complicating India's military strategy. China, a key regional power, would also play a significant role in this conflict. Historically, China has maintained close ties with Pakistan, providing military and economic support as part of its strategic interest in South Asia. In this scenario, China provides logistical, financial, and possibly even limited military support to Pakistan and Bangladesh. While China would be unlikely to enter the conflict directly, it could provide Pakistan with advanced military technology, intelligence support, and diplomatic backing in international forums. China's involvement could tilt the balance of power, making it more difficult for India to secure a quick and decisive victory. India, on the other hand, would likely seek support from its allies. The United States, which has developed close ties with India in recent years, could provide military aid, intelligence, and diplomatic support. Additionally, countries like Russia, which has historically maintained good relations with both India and Pakistan, might try to mediate the conflict to prevent further escalation. As the conventional war drags on, both sides would suffer significant losses. India's advantage in manpower and resources would begin to strain Pakistan's military capabilities, But with Bangladesh in the conflict and China's influence, Pakistan might hold out longer than expected. In such a scenario, both sides would face mounting pressure to negotiate a ceasefire or peace agreement, but the risk of escalation remains high. Now, let's explore what would happen if the conflict escalated beyond conventional warfare into a nuclear confrontation. Both India and Pakistan possess nuclear arsenals, and any escalation into nuclear warfare would have catastrophic consequences for the region and beyond. In this hypothetical scenario, the possibility of nuclear escalation becomes more likely as the war intensifies and one side begins to lose ground. The first stage of nuclear escalation could come in the form of tactical nuclear weapons. Pakistan has developed a doctrine that includes the potential use of tactical nuclear weapons on the battlefield to deter India from launching a full-scale invasion. If Pakistan's conventional forces were overwhelmed, it might consider using these weapons against Indian military formations to halt their advance. Tactical nuclear weapons, which are smaller and designed for battlefield use, would still cause immense devastation but would be seen as a limited nuclear strike compared to larger strategic nuclear weapons. India, in response, might consider retaliating with its own tactical nuclear weapons. However, any nuclear exchange, even at a tactical level, could quickly escalate into full-scale nuclear war. India's nuclear doctrine emphasizes a no-first-use policy, meaning it would only launch nuclear weapons in retaliation for a nuclear attack. If Pakistan used tactical nuclear weapons, India's response could be swift and devastating. At this point, foreign powers would likely step in to de-escalate the situation. China, which has its own strategic interests in the region, would be deeply concerned about a nuclear war breaking out on its borders. China might use its influence to pressure Pakistan to avoid further nuclear escalation, while the United States and Russia would likely intervene diplomatically to prevent India from retaliating with strategic nuclear strikes. However, if the conflict continues to escalate, the consequences could be dire. Both India and Pakistan possess strategic nuclear weapons, which are designed for long-range attacks on cities and infrastructure. A full-scale nuclear exchange between India and Pakistan would result in millions of deaths and widespread destruction across South Asia. Major cities like Delhi, Islamabad, Mumbai, and Karachi would be at risk of annihilation, with fallout spreading across the region and even beyond. Bangladesh's involvement in the conflict would also be a critical factor in a nuclear scenario. If Bangladesh and Pakistan were bound by a nuclear treaty, Bangladesh might be drawn into a nuclear exchange as well. Indian nuclear strikes could target key military and industrial sites in Bangladesh, leading to widespread devastation in the region. The humanitarian consequences of such a conflict would be unimaginable, with millions of civilians affected by radiation, food shortages, and the collapse of infrastructure. In this catastrophic scenario, the international community would be forced to respond. The United Nations would likely call for an immediate ceasefire and humanitarian aid to the affected regions. Global powers, including the United States, Russia, China, and the European Union, would be deeply involved in peace negotiations, not only to prevent further escalation but also to manage the post-conflict fallout. A nuclear war between India and Pakistan would have long-lasting consequences for the entire world. The environmental impact, with potential nuclear winter scenarios, could disrupt global agriculture and food supplies, causing famines in regions far beyond South Asia. Additionally, the economic costs of rebuilding devastated cities and infrastructure would place immense strain on both countries, potentially leading to long-term political instability and economic collapse. In conclusion, a hypothetical war between India and Pakistan, especially with Bangladesh and China involved, would be a highly complex and dangerous conflict. In the conventional phase, India's larger military would likely give it the upper hand, but Pakistan, with Bangladesh as an ally and China's backing, could hold out longer than expected. However, the real danger lies in the potential for nuclear escalation. Once nuclear weapons come into play, the conflict could spiral out of control, leading to catastrophic consequences for the region and the world. The involvement of foreign powers like China and Bangladesh would further complicate the situation, as regional and global interests intersect in South Asia. The possibility of nuclear war is a sobering reminder of the risks involved in any large-scale conflict between nuclear-armed nations. The hope is that diplomacy, international pressure, and the sheer scale of destruction that nuclear weapons can cause would prevent such a scenario from ever unfolding.